AFFiNE is a mostly open source note-taking and knowledge management app that also incorporates whiteboards, databases, sortable tables, and quite a bit more. So I've looked at this product a little while ago, a couple of months ago, and I just put it aside. And I think my mistake then was I approached it, as a lot of people tend to present it, looking at the edgeless canvas mode. It's got two modes, notes, or they call it pages, and edgeless canvas. And the edgeless canvas is what a lot of people talk about because it is fairly impressive in that you could build up quite big mind maps and all sorts of things. But I looked at it and I thought, well, I've got some of that already. So went back to what I was doing before again. But I've had a relook at it about a week and a bit ago. I've spent a solid week on this now. And I've approached it more from a note-taking perspective. I had a look at it and I sort of liked very much what I saw. I decided to import all my 1,800 plus or so notes from Joplin Notes. And now this is also something I should just sort of say something about. My last video I did was about Obsidian Notes. I'd migrated from QO Notes. I've actually migrated a year ago to Joplin Notes, and I've been quite enjoying it. There were quite a few things that I was pretty impressed with. I ticked quite a few of my boxes, really. And I haven't actually made a video about it. There was sort of one or two little things that, I was sort of 95%. And when AFFiNE came along, I decided to give AFFiNE a go now. So I have migrated all my notes. Whether I should still do a video on Joplin Notes, I don't know. Let me know if you're interested in that. And AFFiNE, by the way, is how it is pronounced. I've looked, they've got a phonetic spelling on their project page. So AFFiNE, that is how you pronounce this. I threw myself hook, line, and sinker into it, as I normally do for these products, and really have been doing some detailed notes and comparisons about how it compares with Joplin Notes especially, and Markdown editors, in general, actually, or Markdown formatting, should I say, in general. But about a day or so ago, there was also a sort of a caveat or two that I will be talking about during the video that has now made me sort of rethink this. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to stay now with AFFiNE or if I'm going to just go back to Joplin Notes. And that's going to become clearer during the video. But there are some important concepts around this or things that need to be taken into account. And, by the end of the video, I'm hoping that by the end of the video, I'll have made up my own mind, because I'm very much in, one or the other at the moment. I'm not 100% sure now which way I'm going to fall on this. So let's see where the video takes me as well. I will sort of go through the journey, and I'm going to do this actually in using AFFiNE Notes. I'm not going to do the normal this presentation slide or two. I've done everything actually in the notes. I've been using it this week. So let's do that. It's going to be a little bit messy maybe, but just bear with me on that. So I should also just say the application does install on the three major desktop operating systems, Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, and there are mobile apps as well for iOS and Android. So I think everybody is sort of taken care of, really. I'm going to open the desktop app that I'm using at the moment, and I have got a note here that I've prepared, which is going to kick off with a couple of sort of things I want to cover, and you can see them here on the right hand side in the table of contents. Just briefly on the layout of the screen, the middle is where you do your actual editing of the note or the page. And it only has this view. There isn't a markdown view per se. You've got on the left-hand side here a couple of things that you've marked as your favorites, so they will always stay there on the left-hand side. You've got things like folders, so you can have a folder with subfolders in it of notes. You've got all your various tags you can view there as well, and you've got collections. Collections are rule-based. These would be, for example, everything that contains the Linux tag. I've got another one that excludes templates, and I've got another one that just shows me web clippings. At the top over here, let's just switch to one of the other notes quickly, the other notebooks, or they call it workspaces. I've got workspaces for ham radio. There's the demo one, my books, and notes. Let me just say go to the books one, because I just want to show you something on the view, and I don't want to do my main notes. You'll see here on the view, at the moment, these are sort of card views with a excerpt of the note, and you'll see they've all got an even lower edge over here. You can also use the other one where it does a slightly longer excerpt and it gives you a sort of fills up the spaces. It breaks that sort of straight line really, and you've got your sort of more list view. And on the list view, you can also define if you want to see additional items over here on the line, and whether you do want the excerpt or not, or the body, as well over there. So that's really that on the view side. You can obviously search for everything over there if you use the search option. And you've got journals. I have got journals in this particular notebook, but I have been keeping them up to date on my other one, on the notes one. You've got some notifications. You've got AI. There's actually a sort of an AI that you can activate that's built in. And just as a note, Gemini is the only one that'll give you the free API. The others are all the paid options. And I can just say on the AI, well, I don't know. I may still prefer, it works fairly well. There's nothing particularly wrong with it. I would probably prefer from a privacy perspective maybe to just do that separately in my browser and not actually have it run in here. I don't necessarily want parts, although I must say I've done some searches and it's come back to and replied to me that no, it can't read that note. I've got to actually share the URL and then it'll read from that URL whatever I want. So it's not to say that it's actually passing your notes out anywhere. I don't think that is what's happening, but if you just want to be doubly, triply sure, then you can decide whether you want to activate AI or not. And we'll go through the settings, I think, after I've done the main video. So again, up on the top over here, this is where you choose your different workspaces. And these workspaces, by the way, are completely separate. You can't move the notes or drag them between the workspaces. So just something to bear in mind, unlike Joplin Notes where you can move between the notebooks. Adding of the server over here will be your self-hosted server. In my case, this is my self-hosted server that I'm using, but you could also log into their cloud service over here. There is also free access there and paid access, and I'll come to some issues around that or some benefits of it as well. But let's just go back to notes. And let's have a look then, I think, at the Joplin Notes versus the AFFiNE. So when you start off with anything that's relating to a Markdown editor, there's a couple of sort of key decisions or things that you need to think about before deciding or making decisions between them. And these are, for me, sort of some of the key criteria. Yours might differ. Is it an open source product or not? And the reason for that being is the pro can be actually that if the project is no longer supported, it often can be forked by someone else and continue. And that has happened many times where projects have sort of ground to a halt or haven't been supported, or something has happened, or people haven't liked the direction it's going in. As it gets forked, and there's often a very, very good continuance of the same product, without you having to change. The cons, of course, is that if it's not open source and the product is discontinued, or the company decides they're doing something else now, or they go out of business, well, you have to switch editors. You might be able to carry on using it, but it's not going to go anywhere. So you don't have any options if it's not open source. Then, of course, the other thing is, how does it actually save the data on the drive or the cloud or wherever it's sitting? So the options usually are something along the lines of Markdown files, separate .md files that are saved to the hard drive or wherever, versus the other option being often a database. And I should just say here, well, in this case, Joplin as well as AFFiNE are database based, whereas things like Obsidian Notes, that saves loose standing Markdown files. And there are pros and cons again. So Markdown files themselves, they're very interoperable. If you have got, like I had with QOwn Notes moving to Obsidian Notes, I had my 1,800 Markdown files sitting in a notes directory. I could actually start up Obsidian, point it to the same directory, and just carry on working on those exact same files. No exporting or importing or anything like that. And you could, of course, then switch back to your initial editor or even to a third editor. The point is, if they support the freestanding Markdown files, that is fairly flexible and very interoperable. A database, though, of course, can be better for syncing if there is a sync service provided. So both Joplin, even Obsidian Notes, for example, itself, as part of its paid cloud service, and AFFiNE, they've all got a synchronized service. So in the case of Obsidian, it is doing the syncing with the freestanding files, but AFFiNE and Joplin are both database sync. The database can be better for real-time collaboration, so it can allow multiple people access. It can do record locking and various other things, which can be a little bit finicky and problematic if you've got freestanding Markdown files. So, and in fact, I don't even think that's really possible, because if you're working with them offline, it's not going to be able to do any real-time collaboration like on a whiteboard or something like that. So again, you can see there's an advantage for having a database. Databases can be a lock-in though if you can't bulk export to Markdown files. And here is one of the major caveats at the moment with AFFiNE. There is no bulk export option to anything as far as I know outside of the AFFiNE SQL database. So this means I have put my 1800 notes into AFFiNE. I cannot export them back out to Markdown. So if I want to maybe move later on, or AFFiNE is completely discontinued, or whatever the case is, I'm stuck with my 1800 files in there. You can do them one for one, but 1800 notes or documents is going to take a very long time to export one by one by one. And if you look at how they do the export, that's also a bit problematic. That's another factor. So there is an issue logged for that, or discussion at the moment on the AFFiNE project about that. And quite a few people are not too happy about that, because the question is, do you want to go into it if you can't get out of it? All the other Markdown editors offer ways to get in and usually give you a bulk export option. I mean, that is how I exported from Joplin Notes. I did a bulk export to Markdown, and I did an import into AFFiNE. AFFiNE's not offering me the same option, so that is an issue. And we may touch on that again a bit later. The database does break the Markdown standard linking to files. And what I mean by this is, although it'll export into Markdown and it's fully compliant and so on, we'll look at that a bit later as well. What I mean by this is, where in a Markdown file you normally reference a linked document or an attached image that's in a media folder or an asset folder or something like that. With a database, that doesn't exist in the sort of physical context. So there's no file / heading for the anchor or anything, or file.jpg or subdirectory.jpg or whatever the case is. So that, if you export it, what happens is all those links to the images are often going to be very problematic. You're going to have to maybe redo or cut and paste those images in to the couple of documents you need to fix for that. So just sort of keep that in mind. Whereas, again, if you're using plain Markdown files, they generally are all adhering to the Markdown standard. And I did that from when I moved from Q-own Notes to Obsidian. Both were Markdown file-based, so they were able to read where those assets were, and there wasn't really a problem. I think I just had to maybe fix the subdirectory name. Then, are you going to be using it with a single device or multiple devices? If you've got a single device, you're not going to have to worry maybe so much about syncing of notes and etc. across devices. If it's multiple, then it is something you want to think about. And the reason why is that if there is an option to self-host the synchronization service, well, then you've got to be prepared to self-host it. If there's a free version in the cloud for the sync, then you have to consider maybe what do you get for free and how much do you have to pay if you want the slightly more enhanced version. So, those are things you have to think about. And I will get to AFFiNE's point of view on that just now as well. And yes, I've just mentioned also here on the cons side, you have to consider that potential cost and self-hosting versus effective syncing for many notes if you're going to use their cloud service. Just bear in mind though as well, if your service is working with a database like Joplin Notes is, for example, they don't sync well or don't really sync with something like SyncThing. SyncThing works fine for loose files, usually, but bear in mind if you've got a lot of different devices, like I had with Obsidian Notes, that got messy. It wasn't working for me properly, which is actually why I went to Joplin Notes. But with Joplin Notes, it's database. And your issue there, of course, is that SyncThing doesn't work with databases. It's got indexes and all sorts of things, and it just gets thrown out between having to try and sync multiple offline databases across devices. So you have to consider that. Then the Markdown core standard versus extra features. So the thing here is, most of the editors do support the core standards. And they are compatible in across all those various editor apps. And you'll see down here below, I'm going to get to that just now, which is core and which is not core. Bear in mind, though, you get a lot of extra nice features and additional add-ons that do wonderful things, as does AFFiNE. But then remember that when you do an export to Markdown, those things are going to break. The only thing that's going to be able to read them again is if you import it back into the same editor. Sometimes some of those things that have become fairly standardized, they will actually read between editors, but quite a few things that are unique. For example, in AFFiNE, they've got databases and they've got things like, well, embedded media and certain of those things. Those are not supported in the standard. So it's unlikely that they're going to work if you pull them into a standardized Markdown editor. And then the last thing really just to think about is what sort of syntax is being used when you're actually typing. Is it a pure Markdown syntax or is it rich text editing? So Joplin, for example, does both. It's actually got two views that you can view a note in and edit. AFFiNE is rich text only. And why it's important is a lot of purists are obviously going to be more at home with sometimes just typing Markdown text. For new users, that's not the case. They find it usually quite difficult because they're used to using things like a navigation bar or something where you can click on bold and click on italics and underline, or use Control B or Control I or something like that. So I've said here that yes, rich text is what you see is what you get, and it appeals more to new users. But just remember with rich text, how easy is that workflow still going to be? Where is the navigation bar? The navigation bar is the top of the screen, and every time you're typing something down here and you want to bold, you must go up there or down here. Or is it hovering there where you're typing? You know, so these are little things you just might want to test out and think about if you're doing a lot of typing in your notes. So yeah, that in a nutshell really is my take on what the sort of things you need to think about and what I think about when I'm picking and choosing Markdown editors. So let's jump into the standards a little bit. That's the whole lot. So what I've done here really is, okay, the John Gruber, these standards were actually drawn up in 2004, the Markdown syntax. That's the standard Markdown syntax. And in this column here, I've tried to indicate which are part of a standard. And you'll see actually there's not many that are actually part of the actual standard. So things like headings from size 1 down to size 6 are standard. Emphasis, bold, and italics are, but underline and strike through are not part of a standard. And you'll see when we look at these two products as well, how they do underlines, it's different. They're using differing syntax there. And that means that actually that breaks if you import between the two. Block quotes, that's the one with a little, right-angled bracket or whatever the thing is there. Yes, that's part of the standard. So it's supported across all the editors usually. Lists, ordered and unordered. That is the numbered one and the bullet type lists. They are standard, but now there's different names for this, but they're all the same thing. To do, the tasks, or the checklist type lists, they are actually not standard, but it is fairly standardized how it's applied across the different editors. So you will generally find they will work fine actually, even though they're not part of the original standard. Then code, as far as inline code goes, where you've just got a sort of a 2 or 3 words or whatever the case is that are marked as code inline, that is part of the original standard. But the fenced blocks, the ones where you see the big blocks with the syntax highlighting and everything, it's not part of the original standard, but again, it's very commonly applied across all the editors, so not really a big concern. Links, hyperlinks, the inline ones to, for example, a YouTube channel or a website or something like that is part of the original standard, so well supported. Links to headings, though, is not. And what I mean by the headings here is a heading elsewhere in the same note or to a heading in a different note. That is not applied the same, and it's not part of the original standard. So you'll find here that they are applied a bit differently. And as I pointed out above, database-orientated note managers are going to be doing that very differently because they're giving you a reference in the database to a block or to an anchor point or something, but versus the standalone Markdown file type format, that is saved in. Then images, yes, basically the standard one is covered. The location, as I've just pointed out already here, was again, it's an issue again if a database is used. The horizontal rule is standard. That's that line you see across the screen. Tables, interestingly enough, no, it is not part of the original standard, although you'd think so because they're used all the time. But they are generally supported in the same way. So they are mostly 100% compatible across most text editors I've used. Only things I did find that doesn't work, for example, is where you've got allowance for like right-aligned columns or left-aligned columns or center-aligned columns. That might not be supported, but it'll still work and show up a table. Footnotes, not part of the original standard. It's supported in different ways. Emojis, table of contents, admissions, callouts, and these mermaid diagrams, which are sort of the workflow or use case type diagrams and things you do. They are not, all of those are not part of the original standard. So you will find that they are actually all done differently, and some of them are just not even supported. Table of contents isn't present in all of the different editors. What you're seeing over here, this table of contents is generated from the headers here, yes, but it doesn't, like I think Joplin Notes has got an allowance, and I think Obsidian Notes as well had, you could put a TOC tag and it would generate a table of contents at the beginning of your note. That's what I mean by a table of contents. That doesn't always appear in the Markdown files, and it's interpreted differently across the different packages. Okay, this is going to be a bit of a long one. If you get bored halfway, there are chapter links below the video which you can jump to, but this in essence is my week's worth of work comparing AFFiNE and Joplin. So I'll try not to take too long on it. So again, on the open source side, AFFiNE, yes, it's open source for the self-hosted version. And I mean by that also not just the clients. I'm talking about the self-hosted note synchronization service. That's actually open source. But it does place some minor limitations on the workspace, the number of members. I think it's 10. There is a storage limitation and a size of document. It's equal to this sort of their pro package, but it's just some numeric limits. There's apparently ways of overriding that. I've not really had to, so I haven't worried with it. Bear in mind, though, their own cloud service, that is cloud sourced. So that's not part of the open source, but you're not going to worry about that. We'd be more worried about the self-hosting of the sync service if you wanted. Joplin, yes, fully open source. It's got no actual limits imposed at all. Self-hosting will get you a full online synchronization between devices as well. Then, does it store native Markdown files? No, neither of them do. They are both database driven. So they both have a database that they're using for their storage. AFFiNE has actually got some blobs folders for attachments. As far as I can see with Joplin, it looks like its attachments are part of the database. Do they use pure Markdown formatting? Well, interesting. So AFFiNE, you do all your typing, or you can do all your typing just using rich text editing. That's what it shows you, though, just like logsec. It's a block-based editor, and it'll export and import Markdown. But interestingly enough, it interprets the various typed Markdown symbols while you're editing. So you can type most of the Markdown syntax as you're editing. So for Markdown purists, you can put your ** heading, ** or ## for headings and ** for bold and that sort of things, and it'll interpret that as you're typing. So you have got sort of the best of both worlds there. Joplin, yes, it supports Markdown mode and rich text mode. It's got two panes, and you can type in either or really. And it also exports and imports to Markdown files. Some plugin formatting functions break, though, between the editing modes. So just bear in mind, like colorized text, there are two different plugins. One works in the Markdown editing side, and the other one actually works in the rich text side. Don't use the wrong one, or you won't see the other one, put it that way. So there are some little idiosyncrasies between those two modes. Then the bulk export of notes to Markdown files. That's obviously fairly critical, as I mentioned a bit earlier on, if you want to leave or the product is discontinued. So AFFiNE, no. It's individual export only. So if you've got 10 notes, you're not going to worry too much. The issue has been logged, and I've put the link over here as well. And it does do a full backup to a SQLite 3 database. But without having AFFiNE, you can't read that database or do anything else with it, really. It is possible, though, that somebody may be able to write a utility to export out of the database, but that, as far as I know, doesn't exist at the moment. So, don't think that's going to be of use yet. In Joplin, yes, you can just select a few notes, or you can select all of your notes in a list view, and then you can just choose to export to Markdown and it's done. Plugins. So on AFFiNE, no, not, and I meant here actually community plugins really, because they are dependent on the community project issues being actioned. In other words, people make suggestions and they must action it. Because there are at the moment 4 integrations, but they are not community ones, and you can't just add community plugins there. So again, you are a little bit dependent there on what they're providing you. On the Joplin side, it's very different. They've got well over 100, 150 or so community plugins. And this makes it way more extendable. For example, some of them will give you ability to import Google Keep Notes, show music notations, do omnivore sync, import from Calibre books, notes, that sort of thing, all sorts of things. So that is a plus for Joplin, but just a caveat on the Joplin plugins. Just be aware that some of them can clash with each other. There's a whole lot of them that do tables. But beware of trying to use too many of those together, because you could actually end up breaking your tables, and then you are going to have to, well, you've got undo, but I'm just saying bear in mind that there can be a lot of overlapping plugins. Tables, this is an interesting one actually. So it is built into the GUI on AFFiNE. I don't know why I said yeah, no column adjustment. As far as I remember, I know you can drag your columns wider and narrower. You can set the background color of cells. You can bold text in them. You can drag the column widths. There you go. And you can move rows and columns positions up, down, or left or right. So it's got an incredible amount of flexibility on working in tables. Very, very nice. It's like sitting in a spreadsheet, basically. On Joplin, it is actually, by default, it's manual text input to create your tables, and that's very clunky. And especially if you're trying to reformat them or add a column and so on. However, there is a plugin. It works though in the rich text editor view, so you'd have to stand on that side to use it. But that does allow you to add columns and rows above and below, to stretch your columns and your rows a bit, wider and narrower and so on. So you've got a fair bit of the same that AFFiNE's got. The difference may be that too many plugins could cause a problem over here. This is way slicker, I think, on AFFiNE. But then again, on AFFiNE, you're also limited to what they've given you. There's quite a few interesting plugins like sorting and calculating and a couple of other things that Joplin's got. Then a server web page view for editing. What I mean here is that if you don't have the client, can you just use a browser from anywhere and log in and get your notes and add or update them? Well, yes, you can with AFFiNE. It actually works very well. They give you a full client and editor view. On Joplin, no. You've got the sync, but you actually have to use your clients to do the editing. So it's going to be the desktop app, or it'll be your mobile app, or whatever the case is, but you're not going to be using a browser view. There is a public view to share, but that's not really for editing or for you to access your notes on and so on. So that is a plus for AFFiNE again. It's very slick, and it actually is quite well done. WYSIWYG editing. The difference here really is, yes, they can both do WYSIWYG editing, but the difference with AFFiNE is it's got a floating quick format bar. So if I'm standing here, for example, and I highlight some text here, see, that's what I mean by the floating bar. It's right here. You can now bold, you can mark it as inline, italics, a link, strike through, underline, color, whatever you want to do there. With Joplin, no, it's not. It's got the same sort of bar, but you've got to do it up at the top over here somewhere, and there's a fair bit of movement, for it. But it has got it. I wouldn't say that it hasn't got it. Then the shortcut keys for things like Stream Deck. So Stream Deck I use to inject specific code to change the color of headings, for example, on Joplin Notes. You can't do that with AFFiNE. You are limited to the shortcut keys they provide. So there are a couple of shortcut keys, or quite a few actually, but not, for example, for color and for various other things. And you can't then just inject text to apply that. So whereas with Joplin, you can do that. So I've set up some sort of key codes that will push the codes through that I need to do the custom things in Joplin. But that said, again, changing color is quite quick and easy. It's just that quick drop down, like that, and there's your color that you can change. That is fairly easy. The other difference, of course, with Joplin is you can custom change your shortcut keys, which you can't do for AFFiNE. AFFiNE is hard-coded. There's been a request for that to be changed, but at this stage, you've got to use the keys they give you. And if that clashes with something else, well, then something else has got to change. So, yeah, that's sort of that. The app page layout, in other words, this layout, having table of contents here, the editing in the middle, the favorites on the left, is that customizable? Well, no. It's actually fixed on AFFiNE. It can be a plus in that you don't mess up your layout of your screen all the time. In the beginning with Joplin, I did do that. But you have got various filters and groupings and sortings of the notes list. Remember when you do here all docs. So you can sort of customize that and filter that and sort that over there, but this layout you can't really change. On Joplin, yes, you can. You can reposition, resize the panes, and do all sorts of things with it. I think you've got some basic resizing here, but you can't split this into 3 and put something else down here if you want to. You can do that with Joplin. Just be careful when you do it. Make sure you've saved your setup so that you can restore it when you've messed it up, because you will. Table of contents. And what I mean by that one here is not the one that's inserted into the note. It's this one over here. It is built in on AFFiNE, and it jumps to the position on the mobile app too, and that's quite important. You'll see here on the Joplin side, it's got a plugin that does this, that does table of contents, and it does this the same, in fact very nicely. It's more configurable than this because you've got customizable indent and colors and a few other things. But one of the major minuses for me on Joplin is that you cannot on the mobile app. It'll show you the table of contents, but you can click to your heart's content on headings and nothing jumps. Normally it's not a problem, but I have got some notes. Some of my hosting platforms and Linux ones are very long notes. These are, I don't know, thousands of characters. It's notes that I've built up over years. The problem is it's about 3-4 pages long on the table of contents. So now to get down to the bottom of the note to get to that last one, that's a long time scrolling. So that is for me a big minus actually on the Joplin side. Folders and tags. This is just about organizing whether you can use subfolders over here to, arrange your linked notes and things, and whether you can tag them. Well, in AFFiNE, they've probably got a plus here in that Workspaces, which is this up here where it says notes at the top. Folders, tags, and collections, which are the rule-based folders, can have icons set for each. So you'll see I've got a couple of icons set over here. I've got an icon for my notes and for the other workspaces over there as well. So that's actually quite nice. The only thing is, yes, you can't move notes between the workspaces. You'd have to export them and import them. And you also cannot apply your tags in bulk across the selected documents. There isn't an option for that. You can't like go to my books one and go and tag them all with the tag book. On the Joplin side, notebooks and tags, you can set icons, but you can only set for the notebooks. You can move notes between notebooks, and you can also apply tags as well as some other parameters in bulk across your selected documents. So that's quite a plus in a way. It's maybe prettier on this side, but you've got more functionality on Joplin. Then the public shared notes. This is something that AFFiNE has actually done very nicely. So both of them, you can share your note publicly with a link. And I will share these notes as well. There will be a link below the video that you can go and access these and have a look through them yourself if you want to. So yes, you click on a share button. It's up here at the top. And you can either share it with people in your workspace, that other members, and you can say whether they can edit or view only. And anyone with the link. It's going to either be a no access or a read only. I've already shared it read only, so it's got that already, and that's where you'll copy the link. The interesting point for me though is it does open linked public shared notes. So you can test this for yourself. I've got, I think, the Markdown cheat sheet and I think my Joplin Notes one. They are both shared. Now the one has got a link to the other one. The problem is in Joplin, that doesn't work. Even though they're both publicly shared, if you click on the link, it doesn't work. You've got to replace that with an actual web link. On AFFiNE, that works very sickly. The link that already is in as part of your note, if the other note is also shared, you click on it and it opens seamlessly. So I do like that. That's a real plus, actually. I just think Joplin could have done that a bit better. The way around it is you've really got to put two links in, an internal link and an external link, so that people, can actually click on it. The graph view of related notes, this was a big thing with Obsidian Notes, and it was quite a big thing with Joplin Notes. But as I saw, somebody asked, so what do you actually use it for? I know it makes a pretty picture. It's very busy. 1,800 notes. It looks pretty chaotic trying to see really what's linked to what graphically. So yes, I haven't really said it's really a plus or a minus. Yes, Joplin does have it, if that's important to you. Then at the bottom of a note or in a note, does it show the in and the out links? In other words, other notes that have linked to it, and has it got any outlinks going to other notes? Yes, AFFiNE does do that automatically, or you can have it on automatically, and it'll appear at the bottom of your notes. Joplin doesn't, but it does have a plugin for backlinks. So in other words, other link notes that are linking to the note you're currently busy with, and that will actually insert that at the bottom for you as well. So again, you can see those plugins are coming to the fore sometimes. The split views, now that is really where you want to be able to work side by side with a document or something like that. The difference, or should I say the commonality here between the two, is they both have tabs. So these are the tab views. You can click to jump between multiple open tabs and copy and paste between them, that sort of thing. But what Joplin doesn't have, well, I must say, I haven't actually tried modifying the layout. Maybe there is an easier way to do it, but by default anyway, no, it doesn't have that. It's got the tabs. So what I mean by the split view is you can actually take another one here, say like this one maybe. You can right click and you can say here, open in split view. And it'll open over here, and you could, work independently on both sides with it. So again, I like this. This is a fantastic view if you need to work side by side and compare sort of what you're doing. Let me just see here. Move left, solo view, or close. So that's the split views. Links to other headings in the same note. Yes, they can do it, but there's a difference though here with AFFiNE. One thing AFFiNE does not do is it's got a quick pop-up. You can use its little slash. Oh, interesting. The slash does not work inside the table. That's quite interesting. Well, now you know. But anyway, outside the table, you'd use your slash command and that'll bring up a quick pick menu. But that only allows you to pick other notes. It doesn't give you the headings. Now on the Joplin side, it does a similar thing. You use the two @ symbols here. It'll pop up a list. It'll show you a list of notes. And if you stand on a note and you use the tab button, you can actually then see a list of headings to pick from, and you can pick exactly the heading that you want to link to in the same document or in a different document even. That, as I said, is not possible. You can do it though. It's a bit clunky. You've got to go to the target block or the heading or the whatever you want to link to. You go there and you will, I can do it at the top here. You go to the top of the block, say this block if you wanted to link to that one, and you'd click over there and you'd say copy link to block. And then you go paste that wherever you want the link to be in your document. So you can do it. It's just a little bit back and forth really to do it. And then it's similar really for headings in a different note. Again, you can use that target block. If you use the search function, your problem is again that you will only be able to link to another document, not a heading. A nice thing though, if you are putting a link into another document, it can also show an embedded view of that linked document or a card view, which is quite nice. It won't do that for headings, but it'll do it for documents. So you can link to a target block in a different document or note, but just bear in mind it's going to be that clunky link process again. As I've already said with Joplin, that's actually very easy. You just pop it up, you use the tab, you can select the heading in the remote note as well. And it'll also show a pop-up preview of the linked heading, which is quite nice. Then call-out blocks. Those are these blocks that sort of have info or warning messages or things you want to draw attention to. No, AFFiNE has actually got no support whatsoever, but I sort of found a bit of a workaround. You could maybe create a code block, remove the line numbers, and then format the heading with a color background, and it'll give you sort of an effect of a call-out block. Yes, Joplin does support it, but just bear in mind it's not going to necessarily be compatible across other Markdown editors. Then things like mind maps. Yes, it's built into AFFiNE. You just use the slash menu and you pick it, and it gets done actually in the edgeless mode, and then you could have it appear inside the note as well. And as a matter of interest also, AFFiNE does read the mermaid style mind apps. So the ones that I had created in Joplin, AFFiNE was actually able to read them. I think I just had to change the code block type to mermaid. I think that was all I had to do, but that actually worked. Yes, on Joplin's side, you can use mermaid charts. Generally, how mermaid charts work is, well, the easier way, because I don't think many people can work in native mermaid. You go to a site that helps you generate the mermaid. So you do all the graphical stuff in that site. It gives you the mermaid code, and you just paste it into a code block in Joplin, and it's done. Text blocks. So what I meant by text blocks here is that if you've got a block, because remember now AFFiNE works in blocks, whereas Joplin doesn't, hence this being a no. You can actually drag and you can reorder your headings, your text, etc. in AFFiNE. So that is the text block mode. And I think LogSec does something similar. It's also a block mode editor. Then code blocks. Yes, they're actually both the same. They can both highlight syntax per languages and so on, so no differences. Kanban, built into AFFiNE. There is a plugin for Joplin. Whiteboards, it's built in as part of the edgeless canvas mode, and you're not constrained by a page size. Note that. It's not an A4 size. You can infinitely go wider and wider and wider on your edgeless canvas mode with AFFiNE. And on the Joplin side, well, they've got something called freehand drawing mode, and on a tablet that actually works quite nicely as well. You can actually draw like a sort of a whiteboard piece of paper, really. So yes, it has got that. Database table. So this is a type of a table that is not just a plain table. It's got things like sorting, filtering, field types, some column calculations, and so on. Yes, it's actually built in and ready to use in AFFiNE. Now, I see I said no here originally, but I did discover last night it's not built into Joplin, but some of the table plugins will give you some additional functionality. Like there is one that does table sort. There is another one that does basic calculations, but I did find it a little bit clunky, to be honest. And I had some clashes again there between the plugins and the versions of the plugin. So I would almost be saying, well, certainly not by default, and you wouldn't want to mess around with that in text mode. It's not going to be as good as AFFiNE. I think AFFiNE is actually very well refined, if I could say that. Presentation mode. So what I mean by presentation mode is Joplin doesn't have this, and AFFiNE does have it, but you've got to bear in mind it links graphically to the item that you framed, because you basically frame something in edgeless mode, and those become your presentation. But if you go and edit the document further, it's going to throw it out. And I can show that to you now, because guess what? I probably have been editing this document, and I'll bet you that those frames are thrown out. So if I go here, you can see up the top here, you can toggle in the same, with this note, you can toggle between page mode, which is text, and the edgeless canvas. And if I go into edgeless canvas, it will show me everything that I have already typed. Whoops. You can sort of zoom in and out. You can link them. There's what I meant by, mind mapping or whiteboarding. You can do quite a bit. We can have a look at this maybe before I finish off. But I've got certain of these things over here, and if I go to show the frames, I have framed, I think, 3 of these. I've framed 3 different items. This one is a standalone, so it will be fine. But 1 or 2 of the others, and if you click on them, you can see there where it's highlighting. You can change this and drag and resize it if it's out of alignment. So like the Markdown Standards has already moved completely out, I think, of where they were supposed to be. I think they were up there somewhere, actually. You'll see you can also add a few little graphics if you want to. Those come from some of these other things. You can drag and drop these onto your frames as well. And you can, do your normal highlighting. You can do linking and curves and connections, and that's where you would actually frame as well. You would basically just sort of highlight a frame around something over there. But what I wanted to show you is this is now the 3 frames I've done, and I can click on presentation, and that would be the first frame. So you can do a presentation. You can hide this at the bottom as well if you want to, the toolbar. I'm just leaving it on now so you can see what I can control there. As a matter of interest, we can just have a look at this and just talk about this for half a minute. This is using glances, which I haven't done the video on about yet, by the way. I will still do it. This was just a comparison looking at glances stats for the containers that are running, and I was trying to show Joplin runs as 2 containers, Joplin and its database, and that is the total size. I think I said at the bottom here, 460 megabytes of resources it's using as far as memory goes. AFFiNE, you do not have to run the indexer, wherever the indexer is now. I'm actually not even too sure. Oh, there it is at the top. The indexer uses the most memory. It's a sort of a Elasticsearch alternative. So it's lighter than Elasticsearch, much lighter, but it's still quite big. You'll see that 679 megs. The actual AFFiNE server was 542 megs. The database is 62. Redis is, call that 8 megs. And the AFFiNE migration container, it just seems to, if it doesn't have anything, it exits, so it doesn't use anything. But AFFiNE with the indexer, 1.3 gigabytes of RAM. Without running the indexer, 612. It's sort of comparable. I'll talk just now about the indexer when I get to it. But just to show you that on that slide, and then you can go to the next slide. And now, remember, I realigned this frame, so it is showing you the frame. But that's in essence, now you could talk about this particular thing if you were doing a presentation. And the next one, well, that one is also out. I think it's been knocked out because I've been editing the document. So this is not what was going to be framed. If I go back, you'll see it was actually to talk about presentations, in fact. So I'll get to that. Well, I can actually just, I suppose, also see if I can. So to move around here, by the way, you normally in select mode over there, you've got to click to the hand, and then you can do this. There we go, a mind map, a database. Oopsie. Oh, I've got to go back to select again to get the. So you see, it's not 100%. It is a little bit clunky having to do all this. Okay, there's presentations. So if I go back to presentations now, and I go to the third one, what I wanted to say about presentations was the basic steps are you create your document in page mode or in edgeless canvas. Finalize the steps below after you have completed editing. So you saw what happened. If I've edited, it throws everything out as the frames do not lock onto the blocks. Then you switch the edgeless canvas mode, click on the frame icon and select around what you want to frame. You can rename that frame. And then open the frame sidebar on the right-hand side and click on the presentation icon as I showed there. The nav bar at the bottom has a reorder icon where you can drag and move the order of the frames as well. Oh, we can't quite see that now. Oh, there we go. I can go. There we go. There's the reorder button down there. But in essence, if you want to actually change these, if you are in the frame mode like this, I think you could actually also drag. Oh, you can't. Okay, you've got to. Now I've confused myself because that thing is sitting there. Presentation, sorry. So if you click over there, you can now, I think, move the order. Here we go. There of your presentation, you know, of your frames. That's where you would actually do it. So that is sort of presentations, and it gives you sort of a glimpse in of what the edgeless canvas mode does. You could obviously then add shapes and link them and do all sorts of things. I don't want to go into that. There's lots of people that have done videos really on that. It wasn't really what excited me that much. Where were we now? Presentation mode. Okay, so I've done that, and then I've already done the resource usage. I've showed you that with that glances stats that I showed just now. So what I then wanted to just compare as well is it comes down to also sort of that Markdown standard file. So I've compared here how Joplin and AFFiNE export back to a Markdown file. What do you actually get? I prepared a basic sample Markdown document, and this document is just doing the basics really, the core features of things like different size headings, bold, italics, strikeout. I put a code block in. I've got an unordered list. Oh, this, by the way, what you're seeing here is actually an embedded PDF. I'm using a PDF view just to show you that without it sort of realigning and interpreting this. A numbered list, a checklist, a block quote, an inline quote showing you a link there to a YouTube video, an inline link to my blog. I've inserted an image, and then I've got a basic 3x3 table over here. And below this will be a link to heading 2 above. Now, this is for each of the, well, for AFFiNE and for Joplin, how they do their link, just to see when it exports, what does that link actually look like when it gets exported to Markdown file. So what we can now look at is this is what it looked like when it exported from Joplin. Most of it is fairly okay. I'm just going to talk about some of the changes here. So it exported to a plain .md file, which is the standard, without including the image. So the image was not exported at all. You have to actually then, so this, of course, because it exports them to a named file, it's very easy to bulk export and then bulk import elsewhere, because it basically will export to 1,800 different files, with the .mb extension. Problem is you are going to have to re-add your images. So you'll have to open your old note thing, copy the image to make sure you've got the image, in the new note taker. So that's a little problem there. The underlining uses this sort of syntax. It's a HTML type syntax, insert and no insert. That's what it's using to do the underline. So I think there we go. You can see it over there above. That's what it looked like when it had exported the underline code. The rest is all correct. It's all standard. The other one is the text color has the span style HTML syntax. So if you look there, that's what it did for that green color text. It's opening a span style, a color, giving an RGB color, and it cancels the span after the word. The problem is that syntax is not precisely recognized by any other Markdown editors. So for example, when I pulled in from Joplin Notes, AFFiNE didn't recognize that. It just ignored all the colors. It lost all the color settings. So something to keep in mind there. Then tags do not appear anywhere, so they get stripped off. I did have some tags on the documents. I think, I don't know if you can actually see them here, but anyway, they were set in the document, they were set in the editor, but they disappear when it was exported to Markdown by Joplin. Then the image link, we just got to go to that second page. There we go. The image link, if you look up at the top here, it's actually the standard syntax. So the front part here is all correct. The problem is the back part is supposed to be the physical location on the drive. Now, because it never exported the image, it did nothing with it really. What it's left here is the link in the database to where the image is. Now, that doesn't help you once it's exported. So if it wanted to do it correctly, Joplin should have actually exported the images into a little subfolder called, say, media. And then it should have, whatever the name of that individual file was, it should have said there /media/filename.jpg or whatever the case is. That would have been the correct way to have exported. So Joplin didn't do that correctly. The table is actually fine, but the heading is, I think that was also a problem I said here. The link to the heading anchor is with the anchor name. So you can see there is the anchor name. That is the heading. The problem there is that's also not going to really be recognized and work when you pull it into any other Markdown editor. So let's have a look at AFFiNE. It's also not perfect. And this is also what I mean by when I say Markdown editors. There's no one perfect Markdown editor that does absolutely everything and ticks every box. It just isn't so. They've all got little drawbacks. AFFiNE, this is what the document actually looks like. Again, you'll see all the top information was more or less the same. The difference again was the underline. It's using this backslash, I think, is so that it doesn't display the code. But you'll see they're using HTML U for underline and /U to cancel underline. That's the format or the syntax they're actually using in AFFiNE. So again, that's not standard across all of them. Some might understand it. I should just say on the standards as well, apart from the core standard, there's about another good 10 or 15 plus additional later Markdown standards, but none of them, and they cover these additional things. The problem is none of them are the standard to use. So depending on which one complies with which one, it's not going to be compatible with the others. The others, this is all more or less right. Oh, what I wanted to say here was, though, this is quite problematic. So how AFFiNE is doing its export, remember, it doesn't do a bulk export, it's doing one for one. And I can see also why here. It creates a zip file with the name of the note, so that's nice. It includes the media file inside there, the picture, which is fantastic. That's actually very good. But the problem is if you open the zip file, it's actually named the Markdown file as index.md. So obviously, you know, if it was going to be doing bulk export, they can't all be named index.md. They should have actually used the note name again here. That would have been the right way to have done this. And it does include the media in a assets subfolder. But as I said, this is just not good for bulk exports. The assets subfolder actually potentially looks quite good because it has named each image in there. The biggest problem, I think, really is that it's using this index.md. If they could actually change that to be the note name and allow you to multi-select, then they might actually have nailed the export, but there isn't anything. Okay, underlining I've mentioned. Color syntax is completely stripped out. So where that green was, there we go. This has green text, which is not standard. You'll see there's absolutely nothing. They've stripped out any type of syntax or codes, you know, completely. So it will be completely colorless. Tags do not appear anywhere, so they're also stripped off. And I did mention here on the image side, so let's just go to the image page. You'll see there, this is what they've done for the image. And this is, again, the correct standard syntax, starting with the exclamation mark. This would have been an optional descriptor if you wanted to. But look at that. They've put the subfolder quite correctly is assets / and there is the name of the JPEG. I know it's a bit of an odd name there, but that is the actual name of the file .jpeg for the image. So that is actually 100% correct, actually. They potentially are pretty well on the right road to make a good export if they wanted to. As I said there, it's not designed for bulk export. And then the heading link, it also follows the standard Markdown syntax, but it's using the URL standard that AFFiNE uses for accessing online addresses to block links. These links will not work in other editors and will just show as a broken link in the same document. So there you can see what I'm talking about. There's the descriptor, that's correct. And the link part that they've put their file : / Well, if this did exist in that zip file, then you know, that might have been something, but it doesn't. And I can just say there that the Workspace, if you look at their website, all your notes are in a /workspace /note name. That is the format. So that is actually quite correct with the block ID equals. So they've put everything in there, but it's meaningless outside of their database. That is actually the problem. So yeah, that actually is the export. Let me just mention here, so, you know, I never really talked, because I never did the Joplin video. So why did I leave Obsidian, by the way? Obsidian Notes. Well, it's actually mostly not open source. I think some of the clients were maybe open source, but none of the hosting and the syncing side is. It does, though, save to standard Markdown files for greater interoperability and no lock-in. So for me, that is a plus for Obsidian. I like that, actually. And now this is an interesting thing. Look at this. It's not an open source product per se, but it doesn't lock you in. Contrast that with AFFiNE now. It actually claims to be an open source product with an open source self-hosting capability, but it locks you in to the database. You know, it's not let's put it this way, it's not easy to bulk export. The references for the image attachments in the media subdirectory, but not all importers will follow those links automatically. So I think I had to just edit those in the case of moving to Joplin. I just had to change the subfolder name. I suppose you could have just renamed the subfolder. Why didn't I do that? But anyway, I can't remember, but you can fix that. But it's not too bad. That again is a plus for me. It's got a ton of community plugins, so that's a very good plus for Obsidian. But this is where the glitch came in, and this is actually what made me decide to move. The central syncing is paid for without any self-hosting option. and it works well, no problem. But you either pay for the syncing or you don't have it. And basically what I was doing was I was using SyncThing to sync my 1,800 files. Now, I had, I think, iPad, I had an Android tablet, I had my Linux desktop, and I had my Android phone. And the problem was, more than once, I had some clashes that ended up happening. Although I tried not to edit at the same time and, made sure I closed the one before I opened the other one, I did have some clashes and some issues, and that's actually what sort of drove me off Obsidian in the end. Your mileage may vary on that, but it was becoming a little bit problematic for me. So yeah, okay, that's Obsidian. Linking to a different note, I just wanted to show you then sort of what AFFiNE can do. Obviously, you can have the inline view, which we've mentioned before. This is what a card view looks like, though. It's also a link to the same document, Python programming syntax, but you'll see it's given you an excerpt of the beginning of the document in the card. And for this block, you can also just change that if you want to an embedded view. I don't always use this, though, because it's basically now the full document embedded in there if you wanted to, but you can do it if you want to. We just put it back to card view. And then this was just an example of a mind map. I did this little mind map on the edgeless canvas side, and you can see here, you can take that, you can frame that, and you can say to it, paste it in the note, and then it appears on the note side. And this does seem to stay linked. I mean, as much as I'm moving around things in edgeless canvas mode and so on, it still stayed here very nicely. So this is how you will take things that you've maybe designed over here in the edgeless canvas mode. Oh, the other way I should just say is, oops, you can also press your mouse button and drag it, but that's also the paste, so that might mess things up. But you can say there, display in page, and that will pop it across to your page side. I'm not going to click that now. That's the mind map. Then I just wanted to show you a database table because it is quite a powerful feature to have, and I think it's just worth mentioning here. A database that looks to me like it can have multiple tables as well. I don't think that there is, I've not tried it, but I don't think that this extends to things like, what do you call it? Cross-referencing, between the tables and things like that. The links, I don't think that's what it does, but in essence, you can choose for your columns and you can add more columns there. You can choose what's going to be in that column. You can name it. You can filter, you can change the sort order, you can also move it left or right. So I've chosen text over here for names, and then I've chosen that just shows you what it is. Sorry, you've got to go to type, but you can change it over here. So you can pick your column to be checkboxes, dates, a multi-select, which I'll show now, a number, progress, select, link, etc., etc. over there. That's what you can pick, and these will change slightly depending on what it is. But I've got ages there, so again, you could sort your whole database or resort it if you wanted to. Gender is a selection, so you'll see if I'm going to add a new record here at the bottom, you can click there. Oops, you can click on it, and you can choose from or pick from those options. That's what I mean by a pick list. And then on the assignment completion, well, I called it assignment completion, but it's any progress bar that you want to make use of. You can just adjust this progress to whatever you want, but obviously it carries a value in the column. And then there are also various, let's just get rid of this one. There are also various calculations underneath each column. There's a little calculate that hovers up, and you can pick from a count or a percent type calculation. And what I've done here is, for example, I've set for the age one, just give me the average. So there's the average age. On the gender one, I've asked for a count. So how many are there? There's 5 altogether. On the completion, I asked for a median. So it says 80% is the median. Your sort, you can have multiple. I've sorted it on name at the moment, but you could have changed that to age descending, but you could add an additional sort as well if you wanted to, and within that you could sort further. So it's got a fair bit of sort of interesting, things you can actually do with this database table. You again can link to it because it's a block. That was just the naming. You can edit the view. I think there's a couple of other changes you can make here, different properties and so on as well. So it's not complicated, but it can help you for a lot of sort of basic stuff, especially if you want to include it with a note. Then you can embed various media objects as a card or embedded views. I actually showed that above already. And this is a PDF embedded. Well, I've actually got a PDF. I've shown you the PDF already. But as I said, multiple pages. This is a 54-page document. So that's all possible as well. I've covered the presentations already. Before I get to final thoughts, I just want to have a look at the AFFiNE reference note as well. So I will include these links as well below the video, but there will be links to my Docker Compose file, the stack, the environment variables, and so on. We'll also look at that up here before we finish as well. As I've mentioned here, there's a web clipper as well, which is I think it's for Firefox as well, not just Chrome, but you can clip things and it inserts it with the link and the whole lot into your note, as does Joplin, by the way. Then the pronunciation, just for those that worry about that, it is pronounced AFFiNE, rhymes with define, confine. There's a Q&A as well. And then on the cost side, so this is quite interesting now. The cost is actually not that bad for the basic plan. So let's just look at the self-hosted side quickly. Obviously that's free, but you've got to set up your own VPS or your hosting and etc. So there's a bit of labor and time involved there. You've got unlimited workspaces and documents. That's these notes and the documents in them, unlimited across everything. Storage is 100 gigabytes of storage space for the self-hosted one. As I said, yes, there is a way of apparently overriding this in the database, but let's just go with the defaults. 100 gigs, maximum file size, 100 megabyte per file. Time machine version history is 30 days of version history to go back on. Members per workspace 10, that's another thing that can apparently be overridden. Login devices, they don't mention anything, so I'm not sure if it's unlimited, but there isn't a limit set, put it that way. Then real-time sync and collaboration, yes, on your self-hosted one. So this means if you want to have 3 people working together on the edgeless canvas or working in a note together like you do with, I think, Collabora and Microsoft Word and some of those, that's what they mean by real-time sync and collaboration. That will come with the self-hosted version. The basic cloud plan, this means you're using their cloud for free. It's not costing you a cent. There are just some little limitations here. It's again unlimited documents, but there's a 10 gigabyte storage limit and a 10 megabyte per file size. Those aren't actually that bad though, to be honest. 7-day history, 3 members per workspace, 3 login devices though that you are limited to. So bear that in mind if you maybe got a lot of devices, you know, especially if you've got 3 members with each with 2 devices, you can't all log in together. And there's no real-time sync and collaboration on the free version. But on the Cloud Pro plan, this is $6.75. In South African Rand, I think it's about 85 Rand a month or so. That is not actually such a bad price to pay. I mean, a lot of them are $10 or $15 a month or whatever. There's a bigger plan in this, but I'm just looking at the basics here. You get the same as the self-hosted, but you don't have to set it up, host it, do anything yourself. 30-day, also unlimited login devices, and you've got the real-time sync. The only thing I should possibly mention here is that the AI is not going to be included in these cloud plans. That is an extra cost, and I think it's a bit more than this, in fact. So bear that in mind. I do not think that the AI is essential, though, to be honest. It's a nice to have, and obviously if you've got the one that they have providing built in, you've probably got the full-blown functionality as well. You can, however, set that up in your self-hosted one at no additional cost, but at no additional cost, you will be limited to the free Google Gemini one. The others you are going to have paid plans for. So just bear that in mind. Then admin settings. So interesting enough, on the app that I'm using, the desktop app, you cannot access the admin settings. This is actually sort of a wrapper for a browser, but it doesn't open the admin settings. So normally you would go up here to where your notes or your workspace is, and you could click there on the admin panel. In my case, it's going to actually open up in my other default browser. But otherwise, you can just go in a browser to whatever your URL is for your hosted instance, or maybe your IP address if it's just internal, /admin, and you can log in and get to all the admin settings. So I'll show you when we go to the browser side. I'll just show you where those settings and what they look like. On the AI, yeah, I've already sort of talked about the AI. All I wanted to say there was you do have 1 or 2 changes to make. You will see by default you are limited for some reason to 10 queries a day or something. You can undo that. You can, if you've got self-hosted AFFiNE, you can grant the unlimited Copilot, and you'll see I've put here in the settings under update a user, you tick that on there for unlimited Copilot. That breaks that restriction of 10 actions, and that's under the user settings. Then you also need to set the config for the AI to use settings. In other words, you've got to provide an API key. So either one of your paid APIs, or you need to go to Google Gemini and go and get or set up a free key and use that. And I've mentioned that over there. You've got to set the override to true. And I wasn't sure if it was for the 10 settings or to I think that might be to override and choose other AI models. But nevertheless, in the AI settings, you want to go down to whichever provider you're going to use. That is the ChatGPT OpenAI, but that's a paid one. If you've got Gemini, all you've got to do is leave all this as it is. You must just, there's just 2 little inverted commas there. You need to take your API key and just paste it in there. That's where you've got to paste it. So what will be around it will be the API key : then your API private key, base URL, and then that base URL, leave that as it is. And that should be enough to get your AI working. Oh, you also need to activate, let me just have the AI on there. Also need to activate the web search if you want to from the prompt. That means, does it go out and search for web results or not? I think by default that is off. So you'll toggle that on or off over there. If you had multiple models, you would have selected the other models over there. So obviously that's the paid Gemini 2.5 Pro, which I don't have. This, I don't know, Workspace all documents. I thought this was to give you access, give it access to the documents, but you can see here if I ask it something like, how many notes, how many notes do I have in, can't type, have in my workspace. Let's see what it says. So let's get to the bottom. Were you referring to all documents? Yes, all documents. Is that right spelled? Yes. Unfortunately, I cannot directly provide you with a precise count of all documents. My current capabilities allow me to search for specific content within your documents or retrieve a particular document if I have its ID, but I don't have a function to list or count every single document. So it does have limited access. It will ask you at times to paste the text into the box. Otherwise, what I have found does work is I can do a share of the document, copy that link, and then ask it a question, and I give the link in the prompt there, and then it'll get it from the internet side if you want to put it that way. So yeah, you decide, you know, do you want to use the AI or not? It's not bad. I mean, it is quite nifty to be able to sit and ask quick and easy questions. Yeah, I've got a lot of the web search information I was looking for here. But the problem is that, or should I say, you know, I can actually also close that and have the space available. I prefer to actually have my table of contents open to jump around. You do, by the way, also have your properties of your document. You can set your journal if you want to go to journal, and of course, well, if there's frames and comments as well. I should have showed the comments. So you can also comment if you are busy collaborating with somebody and you're busy working on this document. Now here, you're in this block. You can actually also on the block here go to comment, and you can type a comment. And when you've typed a comment, it looks like this basically. If you go to notifications and in your mobile browser, I think it'll pop up in your notifications. I've got a user called Test. It just says Test has commented in the Joplin Notes versus whatever document, has commented, accepted your invitation. You can click on it and go to it or delete it and mark it as completed, that sort of thing. So there is definitely quite a bit of stuff for collaboration as well. I've already sort of covered the privacy on the AI. It doesn't really have direct access, in other words, scanning of all your documents. But like I said, if you are super worried about that, just cut out the AI, actually. Here's another thing, just as a tip for AFFiNE. I, on my Stream Deck, like to hit a button and then open a particular document, a note, because I keep like my Markdown cheat sheet and I keep my Linux tips on hand all the time. And that was quite easy to do with Joplin Notes, as well as Obsidian Notes, as well as QO Notes. AFFiNE was a little bit more difficult because your problem here is you cannot, from the command line, I thought I could use a command like normally xdg open and give it the link to the document or give it the name document. It actually didn't work like that by default. So what I did was, in the end, I'm actually getting this to work this way now. I'm using the xdg open. I'm giving it a link to the document. If you're in the browser, and I'll show you in the browser in a second where you get that link, just your URL link for the note. You can actually get it to open that as a web link. What I did was, in the browser, I said to it then, no, don't open it in the browser. In future, open it in the desktop app. And now it does sort of work as a workaround, but it's clunky. So if the browser was closed, it would probably, when I hit the button, it would open the browser and then open it in the app. So it's not elegant. It does work, I said here. And I did log a discussion at the GitHub project. There's the link to it about maybe how they could improve that or change that, really. So I'm just going to say it is possible with a workaround. It's not impossible. Then there is this as well. You might find sometimes in the desktop browser, it's using Electron, and there's obviously permission restrictions and sandboxing. So as far as the desktop app, if I put a link, embed a link to a YouTube video, it will sometimes give you this, a configuration error. You test it in your mobile app, you might very well find it works like it works fine for me in Android. So this is just a limitation of the desktop app. And then just a couple of other usage tips. Moving of blocks. It doesn't give you the shortcut, or it's not very easy to find it anyway, but Control Shift and up arrow or Control Shift and down arrow will help you move a block up or down. So you see, if I'm in this block here now and I do Control Shift down arrow, it moves it down. Up arrow moves the block up again. It can get a little bit funny though with embedded headings. You know, when you've got a heading and a bodies of text hanging below it, that can mess things around a bit. So if you're going to do some big movements, I'd suggest just saving first. Well, it does save automatically anyway, but just be ready to undo if there's a problem with that. Then select the block. Doesn't come out very easy. It's not very clear to understand. Yes, you can go to the left over here and then you've got it sort of selected. But another way is you just stand in the block, hit escape, and you've got it selected, and you can instantly carry out whatever you need to do, you know, on that block. The bulleted list shortcut is not documented for some reason, but to start a bulleted list shortcut, you can either highlight a bunch of text or you can just do a Control Shift 8. A numbered list shortcut is a Control Shift 9. Then the other thing I mentioned here, if you do find that your table is cut off on the right size when sizing it wider before the page margin. So if I would have to go back. This is a table. There we go. So if I'm sizing this now bigger, well, this one does size up to the margin there, okay? But imagine now it was cutting off over here somewhere as I was going right, because this is sometimes happens. It's basically can be fixed in the edgeless canvas mode. So all I'm saying here is you can try going into the edgeless canvas mode and then dragging it a bit wider in the edgeless canvas mode. So you'd go in there, you'd go to the table and, oops. Why can I not get my table dragged? Oh, it's already disappeared off the right-hand side again. But if it was stuck, you know, over here somewhere, you could actually adjust it over here and like that. And that should then sort of sort the problem out. I've already mentioned the embedded video just above there. Check with a browser view or a mobile app. And the other thing I wanted to cover here is, yes, I'm not going to be really covering the removing of the limits. There is workarounds. It's in the GitHub project. You can go look for it. But why would you want to enable that index as service if it uses 700 megs of memory? There are a couple of reasons that they give for it, and one or two are pretty valid actually. I didn't have a problem with the standard search. It seemed to be working all right for me, but basically this Elasticsearch or equivalent of Elasticsearch, it enables full text search capabilities by indexing the content of documents and workspaces, allowing fast and efficient retrieval. based on keywords or phrases. So yeah, it's full text search. The indexer maintains an up-to-date search index by processing changes and the updates as asynchronous jobs, ensuring search accuracy. So remember, this is happening on the server side. It also means, though, that as multiple people are working in your workspace or on a document, they're all getting up-to-date search indexing, that's a plus. The service integrates with AFFiNE's document and workspace management features, powering tags like tag-based navigation and document discovery, so it helps make that happen. It uses search backends, and this is the interesting part. This is what it's actually using. Mantic Core Search or PG Vector-enabled PostgreSQL to implement the index and the search functions. It's a good old, remember this is a database-driven system, so it's actually doing the database searching for you. It's a good alternative to Elasticsearch, which is extremely resource intensive and actually much slower. So quite interesting. I'd never heard of Manticore Search before, but it's worth taking note of. It supports indexing large workspaces asynchronously to handle sizable data sets and complex environments. So again, I think especially if you start going into a more corporate environment or bigger teams, then having that running might be actually very worth it. By enabling the indexer, users benefit from advanced search, document tracking, and the AI capabilities that are tied to efficient data indexing. So that's really why you might want to consider, look, you can certainly run it without the indexer and then, see how it works for you. If you need it, then, as I said, this is what it'll maybe give you. If things aren't working, you can actually have a look at that. I just want to have a look quickly at the browser side. We're not going to go into much detail. I just want to show you the admin settings and so on there. And then I'm going to come back here just to show you it's on the browser anyway. I'm going to show you the Docker Compose and so on as well. So this is the browser view, and you'll see it looks fairly similar. You can have the settings a bit different if you want to. By the way, I didn't talk about templates. I didn't find they work so well on the self-hosted version. Oh, it's interesting. It's not showing me the templates now. The templates are actually down here. I've got a couple of templates set up, but I think you'd do better setting up your own templates. The ones that you import from their cloud are obviously set up with some links in their cloud, and not everything works 100%. Some of it, the graphics do come across, and a lot of them need to be viewed in edgeless canvas mode. They don't work in the text mode. So let's just go back to the browser view. So the difference for the browser view really is that the one thing is that you are seeing the URL. So if I was on a document like we did a bit earlier, let's just say this one I've got on WinLink email, for example, then that would be the link for the whole document. If I was to take a heading and I want to link just to a heading, I would click on that over there and I would say copy a link to a block. So it's either copy a link to a block, a heading, or a table or whatever, or you'd have a link to the entire document up here. Remember, this won't be public unless you've shared it. You see there it says no access to anyone with a link. It's not shared yet. But for settings, so you've got a couple of different settings. I've mentioned the account settings and the admin panel settings. That'll be the administrator settings, obviously, because I'm an admin. And the other settings you've got are the workspace settings. So you'll see here, just below the workspace, you've got search the workspace, all the documents in the workspace. You've got the journals that you've set up. You've got notifications. You've got your AI, so you can do general AI searching here as well, or conversations or whatever you want. And you've got settings. So this will be your workspace settings specifically. So it'll be things like here, appearance. You can change your dark or light language, whether you want to open links or not, automatically, browser or desktop. Oh, okay, I could have used this to say in desktop app. Maybe that would have bypassed that whole browser issue. Show the linked document in the sidebar. You've got some editor settings over here. Do you want AFFiNE AI on or off? So that's where you would disable it. Font style. You want new documents to start in page or endless canvas mode. So you could turn on or off middle click pasting with your mouse button. The default page width, displaying doc info. There's your bi-directional links. You can turn them on or off, those in or out links. the theme, your scroll wheel to zoom or not, and then your note, your general sort of look. This is what a note, how it will show up in the edgeless canvas mode now. Black background, do you want corners, shadow styles, border widths? You can do text settings. You've got the default settings for your shapes as well, like what colors they're going to be by default, and then also per shape. There's your frame settings, whether they're going to have a line around the outside or not. The connectors, so these connectors will move with the objects that you resize them and move them around. What'll they look like? Then you've got the pen writing. So obviously this will work a lot better with, you can use your finger, I suppose, or your mouse, but it'll work better on a tablet. You can define how that looks, how mind maps look, and then just the layout, the default layout for the mind map as well. There's your keyboard shortcuts, and that's what I mean. This is all the shortcuts that they give you. So you'll see there is no color. Maybe they'll be adding to this still, I don't know. There's your Markdown. So your Markdown syntax, as I mentioned before, these ones you can also type straight into your document and just use. And you don't have to pick these things off the menu, but you can also use shortcuts. Your shortcut key often being the / command. But again, you'll notice here, you can't change these at all. Notification settings. There's a couple of experimental features you can turn on and off here. Oh, okay, I didn't turn this on yet, did I? So this is your emoji folder icon. You can enable or disable block visibility, PDF embedding, browser rendering, battery save mode, that sort of thing. There's some about AFFiNE that's going to give you your version, your link to the various communities, their website and their community discussion site. And then there's also Workspace preference. This is, by the way, where you can actually change the icon for the workspace itself up there. It took me a while to discover this, but that is where you change the workspace's icon. You can set defaults for the templates. You can enable the URL preview by default. You can delete your workspace. You can reset the sync and resync. There's a couple of properties. I haven't really changed anything there. You can also define members. So you can invite additional members there as well. And there's your limit up the top, 1 out of 10. Integrations, interesting, this has got 3 integrations. I had 4 integrations on my other workspace. But anyway, there's importing from Readwise, there's MCP Server, there's Web Clipper. That's that browser extension I mentioned before. And then the 4th one should be a calendar extension. I'm not sure why it's not appearing in here. Then there's some storage info, and I actually really need to show this on the other one. So what you're going to see here is you could do a full backup. It backs up your images and everything to an offline to the AFFiNE database. It's a SQLite 3 database. The quick export, it just says some attachments or documents might be missing. It doesn't take that long, just do a full backup. But what's also interesting is it shows you unused blobs. So these are attachments or pictures or things that you worked with before. It shows you their sizes here. And it basically says they're in your database, but they're not being used at the moment. So select all there, and you can just say delete. And that will clear these unused blobs that if you need to sort of, save space sort of thing. Embedded setting, workspace embedding. AI can call files embedded in the workspace. Again, you can toggle that on or off. Tells you if your sync is up to date or not. I think this is 181 documents or notes in this workspace. You can upload files to your workspace, and you can ignore documents as well. And there's just a license here again confirming the default. You see I've got 2 users out of 10. So this is per workspace. Eh? So yeah, okay, let me just close the app again and go back. So the admin settings, if you're in the browser view now and you go to your workspace and you click on the icon, you can go to the admin panel. And you'll see it opens up the admin URL up here. And that's why this has got to be accessed really in the browser. Settings are basically these. So the server, you can set what your URL is for the server. It gives you what the format should be up there. You can give it a name. And you can also, this is just optional if you've got multiple hosts, the server will accept. It's like whitelisting, I think, of hosts. Your auth, you can enable or enable new registrations, and you can also now You can have a look. You can go to my website and try this, but I know by default at one stage, if you went to the website, you can automatically run a sort of a demo instance. But I think if you turn all of these off, oh, that's password length and the maximum length for a password. Somewhere I saw another setting where you could tell it, I did find a thing somewhere to disable the demo mode. A lot of people don't like the demo mode, but in essence, if you go to any self-hosted or you go to their cloud and you haven't registered, it'll put you into a demo mode. Just bear in mind, it's not saving anything then really to anywhere. Your notification settings is basically just your SMTP email, and you can do a send a test message there also to make sure that it is working. Your storage is now where you can define where your blobs are going to be, your attachments and your images and that sort of thing. And you can optionally also link to Amazon Web Storage or Cloudflare storage, but I'm just defaulting to my own. And if you are going to be using the others, then you're obviously going to have to define that the setup here for your APIs for Amazon or for Cloudflare or whatever the case is. So that's where you're going to do it under storage over there. OAuth I haven't got activated, but if you're going to be making use of OAuth, GitHub or Google or ORDC, then you'd configure that over there. There's some of the AI settings. I did talk about that earlier, but you are just going to set you'll see there what I meant was the API key, and there's just, it's between those two little semicolons or inverted commas there that you're going to put your API key if you want to link to Anthropic or, whichever one you want to link to. Then under the experimental settings, you can enable metric and tracing collection. I think I left it collected actually for them. It's just for them to see usage, basic usage stats, not seeing your notes or anything. It's nice to support the project and let them know that they are being used. Crypto, you can set a key there as well. I haven't actually used that. I think that was for data encryption. I'm self-hosting, so it doesn't really worry me too much. There's various job settings and concurrency that you can set here as well. I've got mine default anyway, but if you've got a bigger box, you can crank it up a little bit. You can also set throttles if you want to, if you find things are chewing too many resources. I can't remember what the dock is. I haven't actually used that. I think it was also, it's all default anyway. There's a WebSocket access as well. Flags, you can just flag again. You can allow users with early access features to access the app or not. And whether to allow guest users to create a demo workspace. Now, a lot of people said they couldn't turn this off anywhere. Well, I found this setting over here. You can set it on and off in here under admin settings, flags, and whether allow guest users to create a demo workspace or not. So if you go to my site, you should only then see a login prompt. If I had this on, you would jump immediately into a demo workspace, which you could start playing with. Then doc service, not too sure. And client version check you could set as well for minimum versions to access. And then I think there's just an about again, the usual thing there. So that really is the settings, the workability, the Joplin versus AFFiNE, and so on. The only other thing I really want to show you then is the Docker Compose, and these are exactly the same as the link I'm sharing. This is the Docker Compose that I've used. Most of this you'll see is making use of the stack environment variables file. So in Portainer, you can set that up just below where you put your stack Docker Compose, this text you're putting in. So you'll see when you see references like these variables, that is being pulled from that environment file. So you won't see the actual information in this text here. But in essence, this is the AFFiNE image for the server service. You'll see there I've given a container name, AFFiNE server. There's not much you really have to do on this, I don't think. I'm just referencing here the Stack.env file, so it goes and fetches the variables. I think this was all standard. I've added the labels thing. That's just for my updates from Watchtower to see if I've got updates. This is that AFFiNE migration container. Again, I think pretty standard, nothing there. It will depend on, obviously, the database, Redis, and indexer being active. This is the indexer. So this you could leave out if you didn't want the indexer. By default, it's not in. I added it. The only thing is then you do have to add depends on also to the other services, the indexer condition service healthy, but they have documented the changes. I think it is here. There we go. But just to show you, that's my indexer. That is the Redis, and I think that's also standard. This is the database, Postgres. Let me just have a look if there's anything here. I don't think there's anything there. Now, for the networks, I basically have the server sitting in a reverse proxy net so that it's in the same network as my Nginx proxy manager. And then I put the database and all the others, I will have them in a network called AFFiNE, so that they sit on their own in the AFFiNE network. Obviously, the server also needs to be in the AFFiNE network. Otherwise, it won't be able to talk to the database. So if you look here for the server, we go to networks. Where's networks? There we go. Networks. You'll see the server is part of reverse proxy net as well as AFFiNE. The others are only going to be in the network called AFFiNE. And then on the volumes, maybe there's a cleaner way of doing it, but because they have got here under volumes, where's volumes? Oh, it's probably under database, not, there's some volumes, the migration one. They are defining storage/config, and there probably must be one or two more here somewhere. Oh, there we go. Storage and config again. So all I've done is I've mapped those. This is how I prefer to map them. So I am mapping the 4 different locations. I've just got 4 folders that I set up on my server in the correct places, and they are called AFFiNE config, AFFiNE DB, AFFiNE upload, and AFFiNE indexer. And then I'm just defining them here in the Docker Compose file. Then for the environment variables file, the only ones that I'm really using, I think they might give a lot more than this. The only ones I'm using really, I've left that one as AFFiNE revision stable. The port, I think I did change. I'm not sure if I changed the port, but that you can change to suit yourself if it clashes with anything else on your server. And I left username and the database name as AFFiNE, but what I did define was my password. I did go and set a long password for that, the database password. And that really was the only other thing I had to do. After that, it fired up and it ran happily. So yeah, that is sort of it. I just wanted to finish off with my final thoughts. If I can find my final thoughts. My final thoughts should be at the bottom somewhere. Ah, there's my final thoughts. Okay, I alluded to this a little bit earlier. There is no perfect Markdown editor for absolutely everybody. Somebody wants open source, somebody wants closed source, somebody wants to work in pure Markdown, somebody else doesn't. Somebody wants to collaborate real time, somebody doesn't. So you get my point there. There's nothing perfect. You've got to find the one that best suits you, or find for the things that are most important to you. Bear in mind also, many extra features break Markdown compatibility when importing into another editor. What I can advise here as well is don't spend your time every week changing editors, because you're going to tear your hair out. The problem comes with these extra features. So the moment you've got extra colors and you've got extra tables, you've put databases in, those sort of things, they are not going to necessarily import correctly into the next editor. So if you stick to one editor, go wild, enjoy the features. That's why I say maybe find the one that suits you best and try and stick to that one. Don't be like me. Then on Joplin's side, Joplin is very extendable and feature rich with plugins, and they add more plugins all the time and that sort of thing. So if you're a type of power user, see, now I'm speaking to myself maybe already here. If you're a power user and you love features and getting more features and trying things out and that sort of thing, Joplin may be of more interest, as is Obsidian Notes as well. That's something to think about. You're not going to find that really on AFFiNE. What you see is sort of what you get, although what you get is good. Joplin has true Markdown editing. Oh, I should maybe just show you quickly on Joplin, because I've talked about it quite a bit and I haven't really sort of said. This is my note on my Markdown cheat sheet. I normally test a lot of my editors out to see here if the standard stuff or the more fancy stuff breaks when I open it. This is its rich text mode. So this will look the most like AFFiNE. You see at the top here, you've got very similar options here, because these are mostly standard Markdown. You've got your unordered lists, your headings, your line, code, all that sort of thing. And you'll see here, if you type, you can type in it. So there's rich text, works fairly similar to AFFiNE, and I haven't used this much. So that's why when I've been re-looking at this, I thought, Joplin's not that bad, actually. So there you go. It's going to show you headings looking like that, and lists, checkboxes looking like that, and so on. And then how it switches, well, you can see its outline on the right here. You can also see your list. You've always got your list, or if you have it defined this way, your layout, you can see all your various documents or notes here. I've sorted it by last edited, but you could sort by name or whatever the case is. You've got your favorites here, just like AFFiNE. You've got your tag views. I don't know, I'm sure I've got more tags than that. And you've got your notebooks here where you can switch between your notebooks, and you will just synchronize by clicking over there. That is synchronizing, by the way, to my self-hosted Joplin Notes server. Then the important part was here. Oh, there's your tabs, by the way. Here is where you switch. So we are at the moment on the rich text. If I toggle over there, you'll see there is your Markdown editor now. It still shows you your rich text editor on the right, and they move sort of more or less together. So what I meant here was, if you go to lists, you can see there is your Markdown text over there. You can see your Markdown characters over there. Your minuses there, which translate into these over there. Gives you, oh, you know what, why some of these are not showing as full Markdown is, I'll tell you what's happened. I have enabled a plugin which gives me a sort of a rich text view in the Markdown. Not very good. And that is why some of the, I was wondering now why by lists, why is this not showing me the hash over here for the thing? That's what's actually happened. And it is also showing me some highlight of text here, even though there are the Markdown codes over there as well. But in essence, this is really what Joplin looks like. So you could type on, well, if you're like this now, you've got to type on the Markdown mode side, and on the right, you can see how it is rendering. If I went to another normal mode, what have I got? Joplin Notes. You can see there. There you can see a lot more of the Markdown code over there. And on the right, it's nice and cleanly shown in the rich text format. So you'll type on the left, look on the right here, and you can jump up and down here as you need to. If you go to rich text mode again, you can type in this mode, but bear in mind some of these options change up here. So if I click over there, you'll see a whole bunch of things that disappeared up there. So depending on which mode you're in, depends on what you can type in. So that's a little bit clunky maybe. But Joplin does have both of those modes, and it's got true Markdown editing. Joplin's plugins, as I have pointed out, can clash. They're not consistent between the two modes, Markdown and rich text, and they do not all work on the mobile device. So like I will see my table of contents, but it doesn't click on the mobile device. I don't know why. It should actually. Then on the AFFiNE side, the way I see it is its UI is way slicker and cleaner across all devices. You never can really type that well on tiny mobile screens, but as far as an Android or iPad or tablet goes, is a lot better to work with. It's just cleaner because you can't edit and change the layout, that fixed layout, although you can sort of resize things, a few minor things, you can't break it that easily either. Then AFFiNE does have real-time collaboration, which is quite a big plus and maybe a decider for some. AFFiNE definitely has easier to use tables and databases. Now in Joplin, like I said, there is a plugin that does some of the basics and you can resize a few things, but AFFiNE is very, very slick. It's like using Excel or, a spreadsheet or something like that, to be honest. And it's got databases as well, which Joplin doesn't natively support. But AFFiNE does not yet have bulk export to Markdown files. So if you've got more than 10 or 20, then I don't know. To be honest, you'll have to decide. And I don't know. I've got to the end of the video and I still haven't quite decided. I might still just lead back onto Joplin for now. And I think if AFFiNE gets the bulk export, I may then move everything back into it or continue working from there. I'm just very nervous about being completely locked in. I've got so many notes that it's not easy for me to, you can see here, I've archived 109. I've got 116 my book ones these are things that I've pulled out of my Kindle reading notes, Joplin has got a way of importing those highlights and notes that you do. So this is for 116 books. I've done it. I've got 29 ham radio notes. I've got 130 normal notes. I've got, well, these were work ones, 687 meeting notes. These are every single meeting that I attended. So yeah, it's well over 1,000 plus notes. This is not something that I can just put back and forth across things. And if I'm going to be editing and working in AFFiNE, I'm going to be getting deeper and deeper into a hole I can't get out of there. So for me at the moment, that's just making me a bit nervous. I would feel a lot happier if it had a bulk export to Markdown. That to me would just give me that peace of mind, and I could maybe just dive full-heartedly into it. For those that like the real-time editing, the very nice UI, the way it works with tables, real-time collaboration, the databases, the edgeless canvas mode, basic presentations, the built-in AI. It is a very good package. There's nothing wrong with it. As I said, the first time I saw it last week when I started looking at it seriously, I dove straight in and I could put all my notes into it. I spent a whole week working on it and putting everything in right the way I wanted it, putting the color in again, putting my color back for some of my main headings and that sort of thing. So nothing wrong with it. I was very impressed with it. I think it's just the one or two caveats at the moment that are holding me back a little bit from maybe fully diving in, because like I said, my Joplin is also a database storage. It's not standalone Markdown, but I can export in bulk into individual Markdown files. So I know I've always got that. So yeah, that is really it. This has probably been an almightily long video. I see it's 2 hours long, coming up for 2 hours. Okay, I'm going to edit it down a little bit at least. But yeah, sorry about that. There was just an awful lot to say, and I'm hoping the chapter headings or the markers would help people jump around if they wanted to, and there should be a wealth of information anyway in the video, and I'm going to do my best to try and index it as much as I can, so that if people later need to jump into a particular part just to look at the tips that I did, or something like that, then it'll still be of use to people that want to just look at those parts of the video. But if you're still here and you've listened to 2 hours of it, congratulations and thanks very much. That is it. Thanks again. And stay safe out there, and I'll see you in my next video.